So we are in Esther. Esther chapter 1. If you remember last week, we finished up Zechariah 4, and as kind of a refresher, if you were not here last week, so Esther takes place about 57 years. There's 57 years from the time of the temple's completion in Ezra chapter 6 to the beginning of Esther. And initially, so we're looking at around 486 BC. And we have a few central characters. Initially, it is Ahasuerus, or depending on your translation, it might also read as Xerxes or Xerxes the First. Now, there has been some debate, as I mentioned last week, as to who this Xerxes is, but many believe that, and most modern scholarship agrees, that the Xerxes we read of in the book of Esther is the same Xerxes that battled the 300 Spartans at the Battle of Thermopylae. So we have him. We have Vashti, who is queen. And we have here in just a few moments the introduction of Mordecai and his cousin Esther. So what's happened is we have Xerxes, or Ahasuerus, who is ruler of approximately 127 different provinces. And after coming back from battle, he has this 6-month feast where all of the princes and everyone are invited in. And chapter 1 goes over these lavish decorations and furnishings of its court. And he asks at one time Queen Vashti, or at one point rather, Queen Vashti to come in wearing just her crown. And as I mentioned last week, there is some speculation as to why she refused, because we are, quite frankly, in a time when you did not refuse the king under any circumstances. And most scholars tend to lean toward the idea that the reason she refused was because he wanted her to come in to parade her beauty in front of everyone wearing nothing but her crown. And so and he was angry about that and asked his counselors what he should do. And they said, issue an edict and depose her to where she is no longer queen. And the argument being, if the queen, even the queen, can refuse the king without consequence, as the counselors suggest, it's going to be known throughout the entire kingdom. And unfortunately, in this particular kingdom, in these provinces, women are treated as second-class citizens. And you did not disobey your husband or leadership or what have you. And if Vashti is refusing the king, then women will start refusing the princes, their husbands, and then you have utter chaos throughout. Because the husbands, whether they're a prince or not, would not really be able to do anything about it, because for them to punish the wife who refuses to do whatever, I don't know, make a grilled cheese. If they were to try to punish her for that, they would essentially be saying that they are greater than King Xerxes because Xerxes didn't punish Vashti. So she has to be dealt with. And so she is deposed, she's no longer queen. And then prompted by his servants, so then about 3 years passes. He's come home from a humiliating, defeating Greece. Xerxes, he starts considering and reflecting on the action that he took regarding Vashti. And his servants suggest a search for a suitable replacement. And these young virgins are gathered throughout Persia. They're assembled in Shushan. this affords the king the opportunity to select a successor for Vashti from anywhere in the kingdom. Makes things a little bit easier for him, right? And so then after a year of various purification rites, each of the young women was granted a night with the king, but would never be able to enter his presence unless personally requested. So let's see here. Looking for the... So in chapter 2 and verse 3, it says, "Let the king appoint overseers in all the provinces," so 127 provinces of his kingdom, "that they may gather every beautiful young virgin to the citadel of Shushan, to the harem, into the custody of Haggai, the king's eunuch, who is in charge of the women, and let their cosmetics be given to them." Okay? And so he was bringing up Hadassah, that is Esther. So if you're hearing Hadassah or Hadassah, then that's also Esther. His uncle's daughter, she had no father or mother. This is Mordecai bringing her up. So, verse 8, "It came about when the command of and decree of the king were heard, and many young ladies were gathered to the citadel of Susa, into the custody of Haggai, that Esther was taken to the king's palace into the custody of Haggai, who was in charge of the women." And so she did not make known her people or her kindred, because Mordecai had instructed her that she should not make them known, meaning don't say that you're a Jew. Don't say that your people are Jews. Don't say that I'm a Jew. You know, just kind of keep your mouth shut about that, right? And so we have this. Esther, she had been orphaned at a young age, brought up by Mordecai, and so that's really where we are. And we come after this in verse 17, "that the king loved Esther more than all the women, and she found favor and kindness with him more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti." And then afterwards, so now we have Xerxes the first, we've got Ahasuerus, and we have Vashti. And so now one of those principal characters has left, and we've got two more. We've got Mordecai and Hadassah, or Esther. I'll just refer to her as Esther for simplicity. So now we've got Xerxes, Mordecai, Esther. And we get introduced to another one. And Haggai, he's there, but he's kind of gone now. So Xerxes, he promotes Haman. So another character is introduced. This is one of his offers to a government position in Persia, second only to himself. And this is a big thing. You might consider Moses being second to Pharaoh. So Haman has that type of power. He reports to one person and one person alone, and that is Xerxes. And so there is this order that all who serve in the who serve within the kingdom, that they are to pay honor to him, right? So let's see here, excuse me. In verse 21 of chapter 2, we have those days while Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, Bigthan and Teresh, two of the king's officials from those who guarded the door, became angry and sought to lay hands on King Xerxes. But the plot became known to Mordecai, and he told Queen Esther, and Esther informed the king of in Mordecai's name. Now when the plot was investigated and found to be so, they were both hanged on the gallows, and it was written in the book of the Chronicles in the king's presence. For whatever reason, these two guards wanted to kill Xerxes. Xerxes is not a nice man, right? What their personal reason was, we have no idea. It could have been a personal reason. It could have been just that they, were a part of the kingdom, but didn't really like the way he was doing things. There was, even the time of Hitler, for example, various operations and assassination attempts by his own people that were, would try to kill him. So it could be something like that, or it could be something more personal. Now, Mordecai, he's a Jew. Esther's a Jew. His cousin's a Jew. His people are Jews. Now, why would Mordecai, who is a Jew, want to save the life of a Persian king? I mean, what could have been worse? Well, we don't actually know that just yet. But we will see in a moment when we consider that Haman was more than likely second in line for the crown. Right? Because the only person above him was King Xerxes. And if Xerxes is gone, and he has no issue, meaning no descendant that's at least of age to be able to take that, then it would be him. So Mordecai warns Esther. Esther tells the king. It's all recorded in the Chronicles of the Kings. And after these events, this is the beginning of chapter 3, King Ahasuerus, so we've got Haman promoted now, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, and advanced him and established his authority over all the princes who were with him. And all of the king's servants who were at the king's gate bowed down and paid homage to Haman, for so the king had commanded concerning him. But Mordecai neither bowed down nor paid homage. Then the kings, this is verse 3 of chapter 3, then the king's servants who were at the king's gate said to Mordecai, why are you transgressing the king's command? Now it was, when they had spoken daily to him, and he would not listen to them, that they told Haman to see whether Mordecai's reason would stand, for he told them that he was a Jew. So we have a plot to kill Xerxes. It's reported by Mordecai, recorded in the Chronicles of the Kings. Haman is promoted. Xerxes tells everyone, you need to honor Haman. And Mordecai says, no, don't think so. And they're going to him day after day. And so they're probably wearing him down. If, to be truthful, it's probably getting annoying. Oh man, every time I go to work, I got to work with these people, and all they do is they just sit there and complain left and right. Why won't I bow down? Why won't I bow down? So finally, he tells them that he's a Jew. Now, under what circumstances, we don't know. But I'm a Jew. That's why. Now, first, let me ask this. Why is that important? One, him being a Jew, why is it important that he did not bow down?
Doesn't have to put anybody above God.
Right. I mean, that's really it. When you go back to Exodus chapter 20, and you're looking at the Ten Commandments, right? You have verse 3 of Exodus chapter 20. Well, I'll just go ahead and start in verse 2. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. Persian kings believed themselves to be gods. Okay? Yeah. But they believed themselves to be gods. For Mordecai to bow down to Xerxes would be to acknowledge that I, Mordecai, as a Jew, whose people were brought out of Egyptian bondage, who were carried through the wilderness, who had all of these things, that I personally reject you, and I accept him instead. When has anybody ever prospered when they have been God's people and then they reject God? When has that ever led to a prosperous conclusion for that individual? It doesn't. So he tells them that, right? And then, verse 4, back at Esther chapter 3, it was when they had spoken to him daily, he wouldn't listen to them, that they told Haman to see whether Mordecai's reason would stand, for he told them that he was a Jew. So Mordecai tells these individuals, I'm a Jew, I'm not going to bow down, no way, no how. And they report it to Haman, and it's like, hey, do you think this is a good enough reason for him not to be bowing down? That is a most ridiculous and absolutely pointless question to ask. I mean, think about it. You're second in line to the king. The king has ordered everybody in these 127 provinces to honor you and bow down to you when they see you. But this guy's not doing it. Right? Hey, do you think that's a good enough reason?
Yes, mine.
In Mordecai's mind, sure, it's a good reason. In these co-workers' minds, they're not sure if it's a good reason or not.
Yeah.
But then you get to Haman, and what is he supposed to say? Yeah, that's a perfectly fine reason. It's okay. No, there is an egotism. I am second to the king. How dare you not bow down to worship me? So verse 5, when Haman saw that Mordecai neither bowed down nor paid homage to him, he was filled with rage. Right? He's filled with rage. But he disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had told him who the people of Mordecai were. Therefore, Haman sought to destroy all the Jews. So they said, Mordecai's a Jew, his people are Jews. Now, quite frankly, the Jews are outnumbering the Persians. And this is not an uncommon circumstance. In fact, if you look at the early history of Rome during the 1st and 2nd centuries especially, is slaves outnumbered Roman citizens. In fact, they had different colored robes, but slaves would often be given the same color robe as a Roman citizen, because let's say, for example, you look out at Rome and you see these white robes of citizens, and then you see for every white robe about 5 purple or red robes for everything. There's a visual there, you know? And so Haman, he's, instead of just going after Mordecai, we're going to go after all of the Jews. Every single one of them. The people of Mordecai who were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus. So he wants to, his rage incites him to formulate plans for the extermination of the Jewish race. And then when these plans are accompanied by different allegations are submitted to Ahasuerus, to Xerxes, the king replies, do what seems good to you. Because see, here's what happened. If you look in verse 8 of chapter 3, then Haman said to King Ahasuerus, there's a certain people scattered and dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from those of all the other people. They do not observe the king's laws, so it's not the king's interest to let them remain. Look, you've set laws in place. They don't want to obey your laws, so, it's of no benefit to you that the people stay here. Right? If it's pleasing to the king, let it be decreed that they be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who carry on the king's business to put into the king's treasuries. So, hey, King, Xerxes, my boy, we've got a whole group of people, a whole slew of people in these 127 provinces, and well, they don't like you. And they don't like your laws, and they don't obey your laws. So I've got an idea. How about we just get rid of them? Right? And I tell you what, to just sweeten the pot a little bit, you don't even have to pay for it. Because normally, you're having to pay soldiers, right? And it's coming out of the king's treasury. And let's face it, there's nothing more that a king likes. If you just go back to chapter 1 and all his furnishings and all of this, there's nothing more than he's liking than money, power. So he says, you know what? It doesn't cost you a thing. You won't lose a cent out of your treasury. So I'll pay it. Not And then, as the cherry on top, whatever money we get from this, that goes to you. So what's the king have to lose? Right? You've got, because as far as he knows, there is a people, we don't know if it's been explained to Xerxes or not, but there's a people who doesn't like him, who doesn't follow his laws. You've got someone who is willing to pay the military to go out and do this work for you, and whatever money comes in, that goes into your pocket. Where do I sign? Really? And so it says there in verse 10, that the king took his signet ring from his hand, gave it to Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. Then the king said to Haman, the silver is yours, the people also do with them as you please. So the king's scribes were summoned on the 13th day of the first month, and it was written just as Haman commanded, to the king's satraps, to the governors who were over each province, and to the princes of each people, each province according to its script, each people according to its language, being written in the name of King Ahasuerus and sealed with the king's signet ring. Letters were sent by couriers to all of the king's provinces to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate all the Jews, both young and old, women and children, in one day, the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to seize their possessions as plunder. And then a copy of the edict, verse 14, to be issued as law in every province, was published to all the peoples, so that they should be ready for this day. The couriers went out, impelled by the king's command, while the decree was issued at the citadel, and so on. So we have, the king says, all right, yes ma'am.
Mike, at this point, who's king? Xerxes still is, or Haman is? I got confused on that.
Well, quite frankly, that's a very good question, because the seat of power is with Xerxes.
Okay.
But the one that seems to have all the authority regarding this situation is Haman.
Okay.
After all, the king has given his blessing. He's given his signet ring, so it's a ring with a seal on it that would be recognized by all of the governors and what have you. But so technically, Xerxes is still on the throne. You know, but for this situation, he is pretty much a puppet king, right? So we have that this decree goes out. It's written in all of these different languages and all of these different scripts, right? And it's sent to all of the provinces and posted so that everybody knows about it. Now, to kill, to destroy, to annihilate. Kill, destroy, annihilate. It's not only to kill them, it's to destroy who they are as a people, which includes beliefs, it includes worship, it includes their laws, and to annihilate, to wipe them off the face of the planet as though they never even existed. It is destruction to the umpteenth degree. Yes, ma'am.
Well, you know that what you're describing is like genocide.
Absolutely.
What we would call it today. And Haman was, historically, he was descended from the Amalekites.
Yes.
And so cultures there, the Amalekites were the first ones to attack the Jews after they left Egypt. And they had this long history of being enemies. And so I think he had this hatred of the whole Jewish people.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is, as Sherry pointed out, it is what we would call today genocide. You think, for example, Hitler in World War II, and his plan there to kill the Jewish people, and really kind of beginning with the night of broken glass, and expelling Jews from certain areas, that it all just kind of descended at once. But imagine going a step further to destroy them to such a degree that it is as though they never existed to begin with. Right? That's Haman's idea. Now, think of yourself as a Jew during this time. You're in one of these provinces. You are under this rule. You are not a people ruling yourself. You are under rule. And then someone comes along and they tack up, on the side of a house or something like that, this thing, and you get up there and you read it. Oh, I was kind of wondered when I was going to die. I mean, really?
Yeah.
How would you feel if you were to, all of a sudden today, get an email or a phone call, and they say, hey Peggy, I want you to know, next Tuesday, I'm going to come murder you, okay? Just a heads up, right?
I always thought that was really strange. It's like, here it comes.
Yeah.
What?
Because then you're letting all of the citizens of your province, all of the Persians, you're letting all of them know that everybody on this day is to take up a sword, soldier or not. You see a Jewish person, take them out. Doesn't matter how young they are. Newborn baby, gone. Elderly woman, gone. Man in the field, crippled, gone. Just gone. Now, here's kind of an interesting thing that you almost have to wonder. How easy would it have actually been unless the person was already known as a Jew? Right? Because remember, Esther is brought forward, and Mordecai says, don't tell them who you are. So unless there was some real kind of outward sign, perhaps through worship or the ways that you conducted yourself, no one would ever know really that you were a Jew based on looks alone. Because, you think about it. Esther, she's in there for a year, learning how to put on perfumes. It's like a finishing school, right? Learning how to put on perfumes, learning how to dance, learning how to walk with, a book on her head or whatever. And that entire time, no one suspects that she's a Jew. So, in looks, there's not much of a difference, right? And we also have to consider, obviously, that Judaism is a religion and a people, okay? And so, we can take that same application and put it to us today. No one, just by looking at you, is going to necessarily know that you're a Christian. If I didn't know anyone in this room, and I just happen to see you in passing or something like that at Kroger, and maybe we're in line together and I strike up a conversation with you, I'm never going to know, based on looks alone, that you're a Christian. We have to put ourselves out there. There has to be something visible from us that shows that we believe. We have to act on our faith. As James would say, faith without works is dead. Right? So in this order to kill all of the Jews, to annihilate them on this one day, imagine the fear that's in the community. What do you do? What do you do if you know that on this particular day you're going to die? Haman, he sits there and he casts lots in order to find a preferable day to implement this plan. And so really the truth was at work in this. Proverbs 16 and verse 33, the lot is cast into the lap, but the whole disposing there is of God. And the idea behind that is people can cast lots all they want to, from whatever belief system. But ultimately, the decision is God's. And it's going to be God's will. You might think of the opening chapter of Acts, where they're looking for someone to replace Judas, who has gone out and, cracked his neck, right? What do? They cast lots for God to decide. So this is, and the date that's given is 13th day of the 12th month. This date is almost a full year from the time elected for the implementation, the activation of Haman's scheme. Okay? So now picture it. The edict the edict's going out, but the date for this is almost a year away. There's a lot of buildup there, and news spreads throughout the kingdom. And in chapter 4 and verse 3, in each and every province where the commanded decree of the king came, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and wailing, and many lay on sackcloth and ashes. Which sackcloth, it's in our time it would really be like burlap, right? Which is really kind of itchy. I don't know if you've ever worn a burlap sack or not. If you want, I've got one at the house for you. Don't wear it to services though. But and they're putting ashes on this sign of mourning. And so when Mordecai, he finally convinces Esther that maybe divine providence has put her to aid in the preservation of the people. And she proceeds to intercede with plans for that. So you look, let's see here.
Mike, you just pointed out a little earlier how they outnumbered
Yeah,
the rulers.
yeah.
They had a year, had they band together and had strong enough to faith
Sure.
to really have stood their ground rather than, plead with God to, if it's your will, help us to overthrow them. I mean, if they would have just joined together out of 120 provinces.
Yeah.
But they didn't have a telephone. They couldn't communicate like we did.
That's true.
No internet. No internet.
Yeah. Email Mordecai@genocide.com. I mean.
That just stood out in my mind,
Sure.
And God could have very well deterred that because that was not in his plan, but it just strikes me the unity among Christians, the ability we have to overcome Satan.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. The strong are told to bear with those that are weak. We're told to lift one another up and encourage one another. What the makeup is of, one of the things that perhaps stands out a little bit is we don't necessarily know the makeup of the Jewish people. Because even though they may have outnumbered them, a trained soldier versus a farmer, he probably doesn't have much of it, or a tanner, or a fisherman, probably doesn't have much of a chance, And even though there's a specific date that it's been set up for, you don't know when it's coming. I mean, just, are they going to wait until the sun rises, or are they going to break in at 12:01? And they were going off the Persian calendar too. So, but definitely the idea of banding together and being with each other, and we have to also kind of step back and see, even though we might not see it now, we will as we get to the end of the book, that there is a discipline, right? We think, for example, of Jacob and Esau, right? We see Jacob kind of really getting hammered throughout his life by God. You know? There's always something happening to Jacob. We don't ever see that with Esau. Not once do we see Esau under really anything from God, especially the way that Jacob's giving it. Why? Because God disciplines his children. And Esau was not his. So there is some discipline that's coming here, you know. So there's some discipline that's coming, and we also have to remember that even though Esther is just taking place in one part of history, when we get to the prophecies of Daniel, for example, and the statue and these different kingdoms, one of those kingdoms is the Persian kingdom. All of these events, though isolated, are part of God's central plan to where everything is leading to Christ. You know? And we'll see that a little bit more as we get further into the book. But any closing thoughts or comments since our time is up? Okie doke. Well, I thank you for your kind attention. We'll go ahead and pick up with Esther's intervention next week. But appreciate your thoughts and comments, and stay away.